Hi there, Vibe Gardeners. Welcome to another episode of Vibe Gardening Instrumentation. We're going to talk about how you can get your own at-home seed starting indoor setup going. That said, let's go. All right, guys. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how you can get yourself an indoor seed starting setup going. But before we even go into that, one of the things we're going to cover in this episode is, do you actually even want to start seeds indoors, right? Once we answer that, then we're going to talk about where in the house you want to get this thing set up. And then before we even talk about equipment, we want to do a little recap of last episode where we talked about the developmental stages of the plant that really get itself to the point of being able to be transplanted outdoors. And then we're going to match that to the equipment that you will be needing to get the plants to a state of success of being able to go outdoors. With this said, here we go. So a little recap of 2 episodes ago where we talk about, do you want to start your seeds indoors? We really have to ask 4 questions. The first question is your plant an annual or not? Now, if it is an annual, you really want to start indoors because annuals generally cannot survive your climate zone. Now, there are exceptions, as I'm finding out. Some of the things I've been told will not be able to survive in winter and do end up surviving due to some kind of microclimate situation. But that's not a given. These plants usually will die in the winter where you are. And these plants you will have to start every year. So that's one of the things you got to consider before you want to talk about seed starting. That should be your gate question number one. Is it annual or not? If it's yes, then most likely you do have to somehow acquire the plants in a state of getting ready to go out there when your last frost date is done. Now, the second question you want to ask yourself is, how long is the growing season for this plant? Now, when we talked about in the last episode, we'll look at the last and first frost date to kind of determine how long that, uh, well, natural growing season is if you don't want to perform any intervention on the whole growing season. Now, that, and then look at the developmental life cycle of that plant and see generally how long it takes for that plant to get established to be able to get to the harvesting stage. If the time is short, you really want to maximize your yield and growth by starting indoors, and also will determine how long earlier you want to do this. Now, if it's a multi-year plant to get developed, like tree and stuff, you probably shouldn't even attempt it if it's not going to survive winter. So just ask yourself that question. Now, the third question you really want to ask yourself is, do I have the time and the space for it? That is the most critical and usually where people need to stop. If you don't have the time to be able to dedicate to being able to get this right, and if you don't have the space to do it, that's obviously a no. So make sure you probably should have to ask that question first, honestly. And the final question is, do you want to have enough plants where it's actually economical to buy the seed packet, right? With some plants, it doesn't cost that much to get it already pre-germinated and ready to go in a store. A lot of times you can do $3 or $4 to get yourself a plant that's already ready to go from a store nursery. Now, the seed packet itself is going to usually be between $3 and $5 if you buy from a reputable source. And right there, the math doesn't even work out, right? I mean, if you only want to plant one plant, why would you get yourself hundreds of seeds when you really only need one, right? So at that time, you really want to just let someone else do the work for you, and you get the for sure answer of a plant that you know is going to make it in your backyard instead of going through all the heartache and actually end up potentially even losing money. So make sure that you want to plant enough to make this process even worth it for you. So I hope that gives you a good idea of if you want to start plants indoors to begin with. So the next question you really want to ask yourself is, where do you want to do this in your house if you actually do want to start indoors, right? And of course, one of the from previous questions should have been able to have an answer to where in the house you want to do this. Now, granted, it's probably going to be a very limited amount because let's be honest here, we're a society that has a lot of possessions. We have a lot of stuff. So for you to be able to even come up with a space is going to be, you have a very limited range of locations you can choose from. And so first of all, make sure you have the space for it. And the second thing you want to do is consider, is it going to be disruptive to everyday life? Because if you kind of put it in place, that's going to prevent you from doing everything right. So a lot of times you need enough light for the plants, and the daylight cycle is going to be long. You don't want to put this whole entire set in your bedroom because you don't want to have to, live your life on the sleep schedule of plants. That is not ideal because generally speaking, you have 14 to 16 hours of light, and you don't want to be in the middle of your REM and then the light comes on and wakes you up in the middle of the night. No one wants that. So don't do yourself a favor, and the very minimum, don't put in your bedroom. That's a very bad idea. So, and finally, the thing that you have to really kind of, if all those things matches up, you find that place, it's not going to be disruptive to your life, you have enough space for it, you really want to consider how I'm going to find a place that's going to minimize the amount of additional equipment I'm going to need, or how I'm going to be able to get to the resource I need. So the number one thing we're going to talk about is going to be, if ideal, you want to find a place that's going to have a good source of daylight. And that's going to usually be your south-facing window. That's for northern hemisphere. Where a southern hemisphere is going to be your north-facing window. And that's generally going to give you the most amount of daylight throughout the day. If you're going to have that, most likely, for example, here in Michigan, you still have to supplement the light. But at least you're starting not at zero. It really helps out with the economy. And the other thing for sure is that you want to be near resources like, for example, not too far from the water in your house. You want to be near power outlets to be able to power those lights that you probably need to supplement the natural daylight with. So you got to make sure that all those things will be there for you to help you do this job. All right, so before we go into the actual portion about what equipment you're going to need for your setup, let's do a quick recap on the developmental stages and what they need to get the plants going where they are. So the first thing the most demanding aspect of the process for a plant is going to be germination stage, where it's going to you need water to basically wake it up, get everything going. You need warmth to get the enzymes going so that it can actually transform itself. And then you need oxygen to really to simplify, to give it oxygen or like energy to go ahead and do what it needs to do. So those are the key ones. Of course, there are edge cases and exceptions, which if you read the seed packet, like the last episode we talked about, it's going to tell you what it needs. Sometimes it needs light, sometimes it needs other conditions, right? But at very minimum, you need water, you need warmth, and you need oxygen. So, and then once you get past germination, all the other stages, the only extra thing you're going to need is going to be light. Because once the leaf starts growing, you need this photosynthesis to really get it to become a self-independent plant that's going to be ready for the outdoors. You will need light. So those are the four things that a plant needs that you will need to become the master of control on to be able to help your plant to a success. So that's water, warmth, oxygen, and light. Those four are mandatory for every plant. So the first equipment we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about light. So light is actually one of those things, like I said, once the plant gets past the germination state, every single plant is going to need light. So one of the things that I would really recommend you to do is go and watch my episode screenshot right here. I'll link below as well. It's going to be my grow lights. Are they a scam or are they a necessity? And that's going to answer a lot of questions about what is a grow light and do you even need it. So in this case right here, my setup, as you can see right now in the winter, before I do any seed starting, is where I'm running my garlic in containers experiment. So this right now has shop lights. Shop light generally is going to be good enough. Now, in my basement right here, because we have room and not disruptive, there's almost no natural daylight. So I have to give it a lot of power. So it's LED lights, shop lights, total of 140. Each one of these strip is 70 watts. Now, if I have outdoor, like this photo right here, this is my west-facing window in my upstairs. This has a 30-watt grow light hanging over it. And as you can see, it's significantly lower light requirement because I get that warm, strong afternoon sun hitting the plants indoors. And that's going to take a lot of power consumption off your hand. And one of the things that really, like I said, in today's technology, there's no reason for you to not use LED because the amount of power efficiency it gets. You get a lot more light for the same amount of power that it consumes. And with that, really, like when you go out to determine if you need grow light or shop light, you want to look at the price difference. If the price difference between grow light and shop light is negligible, you really want to go for grow light, because grow light you can get away with far less energy consumption to get the same amount of usable light wave for the plant than you would with a shop light. So it will actually save you money. So consider cost efficiency with light. So of course, the next thing that all seed starter need is going to need soil. Of course, unless you do hydroponics, which you can watch my other videos on that. But if you're starting in soil, you need soil, obviously, right? So now there's a lot of different recommendations what soil you need, but to simplify decisions for beginners, I would highly recommend Miracle-Gro indoor potting mix for seed starting. And the reason why I'm recommending this is that if you look at the gardening and their different experiments and a lot of other content creators, Miracle-Gro generally has the most consistently successful performance of all the soils. I don't know all the science and everything behind it. They also offer organic options as well. I'm sure they all work pretty well. And they just have the whole entire process down well. And it's not like it's superior everything they have. It's more like they got the science down to make it the most consistent soil mix you can get from at least amateur experimentation that we can see from our own houses. Now, I don't personally use it. I actually have this formula of 50% potting mix, 30% no nutrition seed starting mix with 20% perlite. That has worked really, really well for me, but that's because I like to mix soil. Now, if you're starting out, you just use Miracle-Gro seed starting potting mix. It's going to just do you a lot of good in the beginning to get you a consistency to start with. So you know what you're doing, and then you can experiment later with whatever works for you. All right, so now the next topic we're going to talk about is addressing water. So this is something that really has two different considerations. You have both top watering and you have bottom watering. And this is one of the things that will dictate your tools. So for when you have a seed in the soil when it's still germinating, it's very fragile and you don't want to jostle around too much. So what you really want to do is you want to give yourself a spray bottle like this. And this is going to give it a gentle mist of water on the surface level, because at that point, the seed may not even have roots yet. So the only way it's going to be able to get water is going to be if it's surface level. And again, like I said, spray bottle is going to give it the gentlest approach you can get. And I personally recommend something like this, which is a plastic spray bottle, because I previously had a glass one. Right here, actually, I dropped it with a fantastic pop. It completely shattered. So to save yourself that trouble and the cutting hazard, get yourself a plastic one. I will link this one I got below in a link, and hopefully it's going to help you. And after you do top watering with a spray bottle, once it's done germinating, when the it starts sprouting, getting to that seedling stage, you want to start using a bottom watering. And this watering can will be very good for that. This is a conventional watering can. You basically just, once I get to the seed tray, it'll make a lot more sense in that, frankly, it's just the easiest way to get water from point A to point B. So it's kind of like make your life easier. You can also water your indoor plants with it. It's just, don't have one, I got a link below for one that's pretty good. All right, so the next item that we're going to talk about here that is actually quite important for seed starting, as you just have guessed, it's a seed starting tray. So this is the one that I use the most common, and it really has three parts to it. And so obviously you have your cell tray in here. This is where you put your soil into, and that's going to be where you plant your seeds. This one in particular has a pop-up plastic. I can let you pop the soil out once you're ready to transplant into a bigger pot. And this is the actual bottom tray, which is watertight and airtight. And then you have your humidity dome on the top with a turnable vent you can control. And one of the main things here is that you got to make sure that when you get these, the cell tray has holes on the bottom. So that way, this is for both moisture control, so that you can get the water out from under the soil and drain it out, and for it to have enough air or oxygen for seeds to be able to germinate. Meeting that water and control and oxygen control. And you have to make sure that this tray, bottom tray here, this bottom tray, you want to make sure that it is watertight and airtight. And the reason for that is that when you want to do your bottom watering, the way the bottom watering works is that you put your seed trays in here, and then you pour water into it. And then what you do is you wait about 5 minutes or so, or however long it takes, for the water to be stopped being absorbed by the soil. And that basically is a natural amount of soil water it needs to get that soil wet. And what it does is that it promotes the root to grow down. And that's why this is such an important thing to have this to be watertight. And then finally, to this humidity dome on top is to create a microclimate to encourage seedling growth. And the very important part is this turnable vent hole. That is extremely important. And the reason for that is that you want to not only have the humidity in here for microclimate, but you want to make sure there's enough air going into here so the seed doesn't suffocate and die, which I've done plenty. So don't make that mistake. Make sure this hole is at least a little bit open. Get some air in there so that you don't kill your plants. For seed tray, of course, like I mentioned in the last clip, is that that's how it looks, and that is one I like. That is I would consider an intermediate tray. Now I've also used these Furry Morse tray before that I bought from Walmart. It is quite good, but it is also super cheap. It does everything, like that image right there I show right there. That is me germinating my pepper. Pepper is one of the harder plants to germinate. Obviously, I've had success using that, so you can absolutely do it. But the one complaint I have is that the quality of those products is low, and also the price indicated it was extremely cheap when I bought it, and so were the quality. So eventually, there were cracks along the different three parts of the product, and it made it really hard for me to be able to get my job done without having water going everywhere and making a mess. So if you want to deal with that, that's going to be something you can do. But also in Christmas, my sister-in-law bought me an upgrade, and it's a product image right here. Now, granted, I have not put it together, but it is the deluxe luxury of seed starting. It's thick plastic, and it's meant to last quite a while. Now, granted, people say if you drop it, it's going to crack, but the thing is, I mean, it's plastic. You drop it hard enough, well, it's going to crack, right? So, is it worth the money? I don't know, but that's the luxury upgrade that I've gotten. They will work very well. I don't know if it's worth it, but I guess we'll find out, right? Because I'll use it this season, and you can watch me doing it in my other episodes. The next important thing that you want in your setup is you want to get a fan. Now, it can be stationary. I have a clip fan that I have a link here. I show a clip fan that I've used before. It works very well. Or oscillating fan, like there's a link here that I'll put below. Oscillating fan is the ideal in that it really rotates the way that the wind direction goes. And it serves two purposes. One is that it mimics the outdoor climate to some extent, so it makes your hardening later on a little easier. But that's not the main purpose. The main purpose really is to do moisture control. What it does is that it helps the soil level to get a good dry wet cycle going, so that there's going to be not just enough water, but also the water is not going to stay long enough to suffocate your plant, as well as also controlling things like mold and algae and disease, and then like a lot of other water related issues you can have with your plants. And that fan is going to basically be able to prevent those problems from happening. So even though it's technically optional, I personally don't find it quite optional, because when I try to start dill seeds indoors, I discovered that without a fan, it will not even strengthen the stalk of the dill seedling enough for it to not collapse on its own and kill itself. So for dill, for instance, and some other plants out there, I'm sure there's other ones out there, if you don't have this fan, you can't even get it more than a few weeks old, honestly. It's just going to flop and die. And of course, with all those control that we talk about, with the light, the temperature, the air, and all that stuff. One thing that you have to be able to take advantage of is going to be are some kind of a timer for your power outlet. So you either get yourself a smart timer like this TP-Link one I have, or any other one that's Wi-Fi controlled. It makes life a lot easier. It's not expensive. And what it's going to do is it's going to let you, from an app on your smartphone, design a timing regiment for your plants. Now, if you don't have that, you can get yourself a mechanical one. They work as well. And it's actually quite nice in that you don't have to let your memory become the weak point of your whole entire germination process, because it can become a problem, right? And especially for lighting, and you want to make sure that you're getting the plants enough light and not too much, because we're not in a world that has 24-hour sunlight, right? That is not natural. We don't want to do the same thing to our plants, even though I've seen experiments out there that say your plants won't die from it, but it's not good for it. So get yourself a timer of some kind for your outlet to control the light at least. But also the fan, I put it on timer as well. It just makes a lot of sense. Now the next product we're going to talk about is going to be controlling heat or warmth using this heat mat. Now the heat mat really is an interesting thing that could be very much optional. And you're going to have to look at your temperature in your house and really try to determine if it's going to be warm enough to germinate and start up certain plants. For example, last year I had to use this heat mat right here to be able to start my bell peppers. Bell pepper is a tropical warm climate plant. And my house temperature about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, or approximately about like 18, 19 degrees Celsius, just wasn't warm enough for whatever it needs to get growing, right? So I had to get this heat mat to do the job. It works pretty well. Now this one that I have is really kind of like a dumber version of it, which is a consistent same heat all the time. Now my sister-in-law again gave me an upgrade this Christmas. She got me a temperature controlled one that has a thermostat that can determine what temperature it's running at. I don't know, again, I don't know if it's worth it or not because I've not used it yet, but I'm going to use it this season, and you can check in later and see how that goes, especially for bell peppers. The final category of equipment that you will need is actually going to be a whole class of equipment called instrumentation. Basically, these are meters that's going to tell you the surface and the soil reading on both humidity and temperature. That's essentially the two things that you need to find out. And that's pretty much it, honestly. And this product I link here, this is something I've got. It's super cheap. It's 6 mini tiny little readers about this big or so. You put it in your seed starting tray. It's going to tell you the surface, temperature, and humidity all in one. It is so cheap that you can actually really, you can quality control it yourself. Put all 6 in one location, turn it on, see if the same reading, right? It's extremely nice like that. So get yourself something cheap like that. And they have the round ones, the rectangular ones. I mean, they're pretty cute, tiny, but work great. And I've tested a few, and it's been quite successful. So I'll link the one I used below. And then the next one is going to be, you want to do soil temperature and soil humidity. Again, these two right here on the image I'm going to show right here, I'll link both products below. This is to make sure that your soil is both dry enough for the next watering and yet wet enough to keep your plants happy at all times. And that's going to be super important. You want to be able to press it down when you do the moisture reading. If you don't push it down, it's not going to have wet contact. And then also the thermometer, the one I'm going to link below is actually for worm farming, which I honestly don't do. Trust me, I'm not doing that. But it's extremely good for its intended purpose of telling you the soil temperature. And that's going to be, especially when using heat mat, it's going to be extremely important to tell you if you're going to be hitting the right temperature at the right depth. All right, guys, so hopefully that's going to give you a good idea of answering a lot of the questions about how to do your home setup for starting seeds indoors. Starting with, do you even want to do it in the first place, right? And then finding the proper location, and then using the plant developmental stage needs, and then matching that to the different equipment that I use for starting my seeds. I'm sure other people have a lot more sophisticated setups with better tools and uh, equipment than I do. But that's what the stuff I have told you already are things I use, and they have been extremely successful last year. And I think this will get you off to a great start. So with that said, keep gardening and keep vibing. Let's go.